Now, let's shift over in this interview to more of the blueprint part of our call, where we break things down step by step in an easy to do manner so that we can really put in play as much as possible of what we're talking about. So how can we approach this in a blueprint model?
So let me start with a principle that I believe very strongly in. I've gone over my 40-year career, I've gone to a lot of conferences and seminars and interacted with a lot of consultants who were brought in to fix something in my organization or to add some new value. And I think one of the things that I've learned from all of this experience is there's something that's very typical out there called 3-day washout. And 3-day washout occurs when you go to a conference or a seminar, or a consultant comes in and has a new change program, and they do their stuff. And after they're gone, 3 days later, it's pretty much washed out. And the reason for that is because people are not necessarily prepared to make the big changes that are required. If they come back from a conference with lots of good ideas, they know that their email is going to be piled high when they come back. They know that there's going to be phone calls that they have to return. And before you know it, they're back in the swing of things the way that they always have been. And they haven't prevented this 3-day washout from occurring. So as I go into organizations as a consultant, I'm very mindful about making sure that they're prepared to deal with the changes that I'm recommending and helping them design. And so that when I walk out and finish the engagement, whether it's a 1-month deal or a year deal, that they have in place a change management program that helps them to stick with the program and continue to modify it on a best use basis. So that's point number one. The very first discussion that I'll have with a leadership team, aside from pointing out this 3-day washout factor, is to talk to them about this issue of differentiation. I'll put up the definition of what differentiation means and ask them if they think by that definition they are separated from the competition. And that generates a great conversation about how we're going to grow in the future, how we're going to have to go down a path far enough, and we haven't today. And that really gets things kicked off. Then I have them choose which of the 3 primary differentiators they think is best for their organization, based on where they're strong, where they feel that they've been most successful, etc. I have them pick operational excellence, customer experience, customer intimacy, or products and services leadership. And there's a fairly good sized conversation and lots of measures and evidence that go along with that.
So let me just jump in here and say, for everybody that's watching, listening, or reading the transcripts of this interview, go back right now and take a look at your business. Take a look at how do you define differentiation as opposed to how we're defining differentiation. How do you define extraordinary versus the way we're defining extraordinary? And also how you define customer experience versus the way we are. I'd like to encourage you to adopt our definition based on some of the best practices and industry perspective that we're bringing to you through this content. And now go to that next step and look at how you're differentiating yourself and decide what aspect of your business do you want to start to lead with from a differentiation standpoint. Operational excellence, products and services, customer intimacy. And as you start to build expertise and differentiation in one area, then start to migrate over to the next one so that you ultimately build a triangle of amazing differentiation across these 3 dimensions: operational excellence, products and services, and customer intimacy. So now let's go to step number 2 and let's see how we can apply that.
So we're going to develop a growth plan from this differentiation. Once we've picked one of those 3 differentiators that you just stated so well, you're going to develop a plan around that. And this is like most planning processes. You know, you're going to identify some specific strategies to differentiate in customer intimacy. And you're going to identify some measures and targets that you're going to use to measure your success. There will be owners that are responsible for carrying out certain tactics. And so it's the basics of putting together a plan. But the plan is very focused on this differentiation aspect, as you just mentioned. And so that's where this is different from just a blue sky, big picture strategic planning process. It's very focused.
Just to add to that, some of the things that I've seen in terms of best practices in organizations is not only are they creating this plan and the key components that you've mentioned here, but they're publicly putting it available inside of their organization or on a wall with clear accountability, responsibility in terms of who's leading that initiative, what the milestones are, and when it's due, and providing overall updates across the organization, because they are standing behind these plans as being very important, and they want to build as much buy-in and support across the employee base as possible. So don't just keep this plan a secret among a few key stakeholders. This needs to be broadened so that you really build the support that you need across the organization.
Absolutely. And that really leads into the next point here, which is the leaders have to communicate this burning platform or this reason to make change. If there isn't a crisis out there, like there might be in the cable industry right now, with many of the big companies like Comcast, et cetera, saying, you know, we know that we're notoriously bad for customer experience and customer service, and we've got to fix that, and we're going to dedicate X $100 million to do that. You've got to communicate to your employees the seriousness, the urgency, the fact that there is something here that needs to be done and needs to be done quickly. And so the leader.
Let me just jump in if I can here, because this is such a key point. I want to throw the challenge out to everybody who's watching, listening, and reading this video in the transcript. And that is, once you create the area of differentiation that you want to focus on, once you create the plan, once you start to bring people together to be able to execute this plan, I want to challenge you to be able to randomly ask different members of your employee base from the top to the bottom and ask them, what are we focused on differentiating this year, this quarter? And what are some of the key things that we as an organization are doing? And how are you helping us move in this direction? And watch and listen very carefully to see what they say. And that's going to be a big measure to figure out if your messaging and what we're going to talk about in step number 4, based on our discussions in the green room, is all about the employee engagement side. So take us away now into step 4, employee engagement. We got to go through this. This is key.
Well, let me just tell you, I love what you just said. I think it's so much about checking in with people about how they are perceiving the differentiator, how they are perceiving the unique balance that has to happen between getting work done and caring for them at a high level. That's a really fine thing. People will say, I don't have time to care. I don't have time to do that. I'm so busy doing my work. And yet, that's the key part of the differentiator that's going to make the big difference for the company. So let's talk about step 4, this employee engagement. I'm going to go back to my story from the Ritz-Carlton to highlight a point here on employee engagement. It wasn't just that Luis did a great thing for me in bringing me a spoon. After that, here's what happened at the Ritz. I got a letter from the Ritz-Carlton 2 days later after the conference, because I had chosen to tell that story, my Luis story, to somebody at the Ritz-Carlton to let them know that this person did an exemplary thing for me, an extraordinary thing for me. And the Ritz-Carlton said, thank you very much for taking the time to tell us. A lot of people don't do that, but thank you. And we're going to call you or get in touch with you next week. I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I wonder what that would be about, but thank you very much. Appreciate it. The following week, I got a letter from the Vice President of Guest Relations at the Ritz-Carlton, who said, Mr. Tombazian, thanks for taking the time. Next time you're on property, let us know you're here, and we're going to take care of all your needs. Second thing we're going to do for Luis is we're going to give him a small monetary bonus for this. It isn't everybody that gets nice little checks when they do nice things for people. But on the other hand, this was extra special in terms of him paying such attention to you and being able to bring you a spoon all the way up at the front of the ballroom. And so we're going to give him a small check, probably $25 or $50. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to recognize him at a ceremony of his peers. The highest honor that can be paid to somebody at the Ritz is being recognized in front of their peers. And so that matters a lot, and people learn that that's very important. The third thing that they were going to do was submit my story about Luis and what he had done for me to their corporate headquarters, where they keep all of these legends in a big database. And every year they go through them at the end of each month and decide which one of those stories best represents the Ritz-Carlton motto of ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And it turned out 30 days later that I got word that the Luis story was selected, and 30,000 Ritz employees around the world heard that story. And he is a corporate hero for bringing me a spoon. Now,
I love it.
Now that's customer, that's employee engagement that leads to customer engagement.
And there's so many lessons in what you just shared. And I'd like to help break it down. One of the big things that I heard is executives' involvement, executive buy-in, executive engagement into making sure that the culture that they want to foster is aligned with what they talk about. They're actually involved in doing this. I mean, they took the time to get in touch with you, and they had a process involved of what happens to that employee based on good feedback, how that gets amplified in the organization, how they get acknowledged, a small financial benefit which helps to reward this behavior, and especially the acknowledgement being the bigger piece of it. So to me, one big thing that stood out is leading by examples. The executives are towing the line, relates to this developing and delivering differentiation from a customer intimacy standpoint. And the second big thing that came out is the executive made themselves available to say, the next time you come to the Ritz-Carlton, it's a foregone conclusion, you are going to come back to us. And when you do come back to us, I'm going to personally make sure that you get a great experience, which, as they also probably know, that you're likely to tell more great stories, which further perpetuates the brand internally in the organization, externally in the organization. So this is absolutely critical. I love this story from you.
Thank you. Thank you. It does highlight what an organization needs to do to support that kind of behavior.
So we've talked about building identifying the area of differentiation. We've talked about building the plan. We've talked about employee engagement. We've talked about making sure there's executive buy-in, making the plan public, holding people accountable to move forward, having alignment across the culture inside the organization. Now, the last piece is all about the growth plan launch. Help us understand what that's about.
So now we're ready. We've prepared the soil, so to speak. We've planted, we've developed a plan. We've got employees excited and engaged. We're checking in with them, like you suggested, about how they're feeling about the differentiation and how that's going to work and how they're going to apply it in their roles. And so we are pretty much ready now to have the jumping off point. What I like to do at this point is to have them do something big. It's a launch party. It's a town hall, something that's bigger than normal, that suggests we're off on a journey now towards something that's very grand, and we are all very excited about it. And this gets people, really motivated, excited about the course. And so we're going to present the plan. We're going to let people know the vision in terms of what we expect in terms of results. And I think that this is where people say, we're actually serious about this. It's not the next shiny object. It's not a fad that's come through every other month. This is a program that has lots of legs behind it. Leaders are starting to model the behavior. We're starting to hear some of the vocabulary in our meetings. We're starting to see why customers are gravitating more towards us, because we're starting to think about differentiation in a different way. And so this is where I think you have a big kickoff, a big promotional event, and get people very, very excited.
That's so important. It's so important to be able to put a stake in the ground and show the commitment behind what it is that you want to do. And then more important to stay the road and check in with everybody and let people know what's working and continue to reinforce the vision, because when the vision keeps changing, there is no buy-in, there isn't commitment, and it's just the flavor of the month syndrome sits in. And that is absolutely detrimental to accomplishing what it is that we're trying to do here. So very important to make sure you kick off with a boom and that you have key checkpoint meetings as you get to your next plateau. Once you hit that next plateau, you've defined the next trajectory of where you want to go to.
Yes, and sometimes I've even been involved in developing some customer testimonials that could be shown as videos during that kickoff. and they can talk about the fact that, we really like your company a lot, but we hear that you're doing great things and that you're going to be doing some more special things for us. And we're just with you. We know we've had some input into the design that you've come up with, and we're very excited about the new partnership that we're going to have together. That can play really well with employees.
That's a really great point. Let's take a second to talk a little bit about that. I was reading a book by Tony Hsieh from Zappos, and he talked about the 4 aspects that are predictors of happiness. And it's the perception that you're in control in your life, perception of progress, the amount of meaning that you create around your life, and the depth and number of relationships that you have. And I've since taken that definition and I really adopted it. I really believe things. Now, that being said, remember, number 3 was the level of meaning that you create in your life. So if you imagine that you have an employee base and most of those employees are not directly communicating with customers, they're not in sales per se, or they're not in customer service picking up phone lines, they're not in the executive ranks where they're being called into important meetings with other executives, they're doing their job, they're doing it to the best of their ability based on a set of clear deliverables and outcomes and based on their responsibilities. Now, this group, by and large, isn't exposed to these customer wins as much as they probably should be in most organizations. So for those of you that are watching, listening, and reading this material, think about how can I proactively show to my employees the good work that we're doing that shows how their work makes a difference. Makes a difference. That's the key thing, because the more you can connect how their work makes a difference to the bigger picture of the company, the clients, and then the bigger picture of the overall corporation, the more you're going to have their hearts, not just their minds, not just them punching in and out of a time clock to do whatever it is that they are paid to do. And that to that employee engagement component.
Well, you said that very well. It's a rare customer who will take the time to congratulate you the way that I did with the Luis story at the Ritz. But your leaders have to fill that cheerleading kind of gap, as you say there, and they need to be the ones jumping up and down on the sideline, cheering for employees when they do these special things, these extraordinary behaviors. Because if the customer doesn't say anything, or on their next survey they don't give you the highest possible rating, you still need to be recognizing the fact that the employee behaved exemplary and did extraordinary things that will pay off in the long run. So that's the mark of true leaders in this customer experience, customer intimacy movement.
And for many people who are watching this, they might say, well, we have to have executives that buy into and understand the importance of customer experience. And I'm going to say, yes, you do. You have to have that leadership. If that leadership isn't on side with us, then we need to look at how we can involve them to start to realize some of the benefits of implementing what we're talking about. And if they don't buy in and you happen to be a member of a board, then you might need to look for some additional leadership, because this is a very top-down driven exercise. I mean, individuals at the bottom of a hierarchy can do their very best, but if it is not flowing from the top down, you won't have the appropriate alignment, support, methodologies, and systems to stay with it over the long term.